Today is Monday, January 17th, 2011, and my name is MROHP. I am interviewing Deborah Hayes, who is a member of the League of Women Voters of Boulder County and a past president of the League. Deborah is also a professor emeritus of the School of Music at the University of Colorado in Boulder. This interview is being recorded for the Maria Rogers Oral History Program. The interview is being filmed by Emily Schuster. Deborah, the first question I'm going to ask is, what is your date of birth?
I was born on December 13, 1939, and I was born in Miami, Florida, but I grew up mostly in California, in Northern California, in a little town of Piedmont, population about 10,000, but it's surrounded by the big city of Oakland, across the bay from San Francisco. Yeah.
And how did perhaps your background, your upbringing, influence you with regard to the League of Women Voters?
Well, my mother was always in the League. I sort of later realized she said she had helped form a League of Women Voters in Miami, you know, a local league. League is very locally based, grassroots. And then she got very active when she moved to Piedmont, that town still has a very active league. She was really more active than I. She was really a full-time volunteer after my brothers and I were in school and, you know, pretty self-sufficient. And after we left home too, she was active in the statewide league. She went around the state, drove around to help start new leagues, and then she was California's state president, so she spent a lot of time lobbying at the state legislature. That was when Ronald Reagan was governor. She didn't ever think he figured out who she was representing, and the fact that the league didn't really agree with him on a lot of things, but he was always very charming. That's about all she ever said about it. And then she ran for office. She was on the community college board or junior college board for that whole area. They built a new junior college. In California, the junior colleges have boards sort of like the K through 12 in Colorado. And then my father actually was on the Piedmont school board for a long time, 2 terms. So since both parents were really very active and in politics and even got elected to office, and I guess I just thought when I moved here to take the job at CU, I just thought this was part of becoming a grown-up. You joined the League of Women Voters and you got involved, and I also wanted to know more about Boulder. I went to a few league meetings and I realized that I hadn't really known a lot about California, but the little I did know, Colorado was a lot different in many respects, and this area is much more rural.
So this was a way of getting to know your new home.
Right.
And being able to participate, not maybe directly in government, but sort of indirectly as a civic activist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And could you tell us when you landed here and perhaps what the situation was in Boulder at the time and the kinds of impressions you had of our town?
Oh, well, I was pretty involved with the university. I came here in 1968 to teach music history and music appreciation, and I think I was hired to help kind of organize the music library, but after I got here they hired a real music librarian. But anyway, the department was really expanding like mad. They had hired 2 new people in the previous 2 years, and we hired another person the year after I came here, another person straight out of graduate school. So it was really growing. And everyone was talking about how Boulder had grown since IBM moved here, but course, compared to 1968, it was pretty small town compared to right now, 2011.
But it was a hot time at
Yeah.
the university and in Boulder.
Well, yes. It was a couple years later. The students went on strike and wouldn't take exams, and it wasn't quite as active and quite as hot as, of course, Berkeley, but there was the same thing in the air. The Vietnam War protests, and it was really a bad time.
Now, as an undergraduate and graduate student, had you done any civic work or league work? Or
Oh, I really didn't. No, I really didn't do much. I was vaguely aware of the city government, and
was that
not
in
really.
California?
I'd been at graduate school in Stanford, so I was sort of aware of Palo Alto, but I never joined the League of Women Voters. I think I just felt like a student. I didn't feel. I probably should have joined the League of Women Voters. I would have probably had a wonderful time, but it didn't occur to me.
As it doesn't actually today to many young people.
Right,
so.
right. We had one member who was her goal when she turned 18 was to join the League of Women Voters, and so I think about the day after her birthday she showed up at a meeting. But that's kind of unusual.
It certainly is. So, is there anything else about Boulder in the late 60s, early 70s, and when did you join the league here?
Well, I joined the year after I got here. I think 1969. They say. They keep records of that kind of thing, and I kind of had the normal, what was then the normal kind of course of involvement. What struck me was that the minute I would express any interest in anything, people would start heaping, publications on me, or assign me to be on a committee that would make some kind of decision about something I'd never heard of. But they just sort of threw you in, and they assumed that you would get up to speed. So I started out observing what was then the City County Board of Health. It's now just the county, but Boulder County. And they, that was very different from what I was used to, because they were mostly dealing with what they called environmental health, which was all the failing septic systems that were polluting the groundwater. And a lot of that really didn't get in the newspaper, but I would write little reports for the League newsletter, and I think gradually, because it was really a big land use question. It wasn't really, the Board of Health was also dealing with, inoculations and mosquito control and all that, the usual things, but because it was so rural, because developers could just buy farmland out in the country and build a housing development and put in individual septic systems, and not have to attach to the city sewer or get annexed or anything. There was this really real problem, and it became, for the League of Women Voters, it became part of a larger issue of controlling land use and comprehensive planning, and saying, we have this core urban area, and then we have a second area 2 that might be developed within the next few years, and then we have the outlying areas that should not be developed. And when people apply to build a new factory or something, there was a lot of pressure in the 70s and 80s for new information technology kind of companies that are clean businesses, but still we really didn't want to start plopping down a huge campus, as they're called, in the middle of the farmland. So the League got very interested in comprehensive planning and land use.
And that had been a tradition of the League, right, since the
Especially
1950s?
Oh yes, I think so.
With Janet Roberts and
With Janet Roberts, Ruth
Ruth
Correll,
Wright.
Ruth Wright.
Ruth Correll.
yeah, trying to cut down on commuting, people driving long distances, cut down on air pollution, see if people could live closer to where they work. And
still very vital issues for today.
yes.
Could you briefly explain the mission of the League and how it operates or functions to accomplish its goals?
Okay.
And generally speaking, like how do you go, because you say it is grassroots, how do you go from, say, an idea to actually an action? What that process is?
Yes, well, it's the League, you kind of start out with, as one of my friends calls it, you're getting on a moving train. You start out with this whole history of studies and position statements at the national level, the state level, and then our local Boulder County level that have been brewing since, say, 1920 for the National League, 1931 for Boulder, a little later for Longmont. The Longmont and Boulder Leagues merged a few years ago to be Boulder County. But anyway, you have all this, and then for a new study, or if you decide some issue is getting important and you need to update your information, or you need to decide you're going to do a lot of advocacy, you're going to start doing a lot of letter writing and lobbying. That's kind of planned for by the members meeting all together at these what we call program planning meetings, and that decides the schedule for the next year. When there is a study, there's a committee that just concentrates on that and compiles all its material. I'm working on one now that's talking about affordable housing in Boulder County. And then we present our material to the unit meetings. Units are just small group meetings. The League meets in a series of, like, if it's a meeting week for the League, like once a month, then we have 4 meetings in different places, different locations, different times, morning, afternoon, sometimes evening. And the members discuss the material that the study committee has brought to them and decide if there's agreement, if there's consensus. I'm told that this is kind of a Quaker idea that you don't take a vote and the majority rules. You decide on consensus, and if there's no consensus, no agreement, you just say there's no agreement. And so then you sort of compile this position. This is what our members agree on. And then when the issue comes up, and the same issues come up all the time, as you say, then you know which side you're on, so to speak. And you can issue a statement or start talking to legislators or city council members or county commissioners.
And
I guess sometimes the issue involves the whole state, like the higher education, the funding of higher education. And so all the leagues in the state do the same, confront the same material, discuss it. And sometimes it's a national issue, of course, like Congress, the relationship of Congress to the presidency, or support of the United Nations. And then every league in the entire country studies the same material.
So it sounds like it's a very integrated organization, but that ideas can bubble up from
Yes.
the local members, so that you are addressing strictly, say, Boulder County issues.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So there are kind of multiple levels of involvement.
Right.
And would you say in general that people are more involved, or the women of the League of Women Voters are more involved in, say, your local issues, and that's what kind of drives the local group?
Yeah, I think so. People get sometimes it's a national issue. We gain a lot of members when we start holding meetings about something that strikes someone's fancy, like if it's announced in the paper that we're discussing the local schools, that often brings people in. And of course our meetings are public, but sometimes people are driven to, or inspired to join the league, or let's see, when we studied in the 80s reproductive choice, we attracted a lot of members, and then when we came out, when our consensus was strongly in support of a woman's right to choose, we lost. I know of one member we lost. I think she had pressure at home that this was a sort of radical view, and she just didn't renew her membership. And then we've had people that just joined a committee and worked with the study committee and didn't actually pay dues, which is okay. It's okay. And we have people that contribute to the league, contribute money, but don't want to pay dues because they don't want to get all this material they're supposed to read. They just think it's a good idea.
That's right. Checkbook activists. Huh?
Right.
Well, good. And what are the varieties of actions that you can take? You mentioned lobbying, which might be at the state level or Boulder City Council. What other kinds of actions does the league undertake?
Well, letter writing and sometimes public forums. We sometimes have panel discussions on various sides of an issue, but if we already have a position, then we invite speakers that explain just our side. We had a very interesting meeting, I guess, last year on the new fair campaign law, public financing of elections. Really good panel. And it was also televised on not our Channel 8, but Channel 22. So that was a good way to educate people. Somebody once told me when I was president, I guess, that the fallacy of the League of Women Voters is that we believe that if we educate people, they'll agree with us, and it just doesn't always happen. But people disagree.
Well, that is always the hope of rational people.
Right.
That's that,
but rational
that
people
education, right?
Right. Rational people can disagree on some things, but unintended consequences. The League has often had to relook at something. We thought we had a good solution, and then it turned out to just create dozens of more problems.
Well, it's good to know that you're all human, right?
Right.
Now, what roles have you played in the organization? What work interested you? And did your work prepare you for or connect to other areas of your life? Other community work, other organizational work, your career? So that's 3 questions in one.
Well, I guess I left off with observer. I was observing the Board of Health, and I think maybe some other meetings, maybe City Council. But anyway, then I was on the board in the 70s, I guess, 1970s, and then I became president I was president from 1979 to 1981, and I think most of my work was with what we call natural resources. They're kind of 4 areas: natural resources, social policy. At the national level, there's international relations, and at the state and local level, it's just called government, which includes schools. And so I was doing mostly natural resources, land use. When I became president, I was president after Carolyn Holmberg, who died rather young. She would be a wonderful interviewee, but she unfortunately died. There's some Boulder County open space named in her honor because after she was league president, she went on to be, I think, open space coordinator for the county. Very, very influential woman. Anyway, when she was league president from 1977 to 79, she had organized the entire city, all sorts of people that didn't usually work together, all sorts of sides of the political spectrum, to revitalize and redevelop the Crossroads area, which was a little kind of decrepit mall and some individual shops and in what used to be the outlying areas of the city, but was now pretty close to the center of the city. So there were very good land use reasons to redevelop Crossroads and economic reasons. It was going to be done with tax increment financing, which was kind of new at the time. It would be funded with the difference between the sales tax revenues of the old mall and the new mall. There was an urban renewal authority appointed. Janet Roberts was the head. They were going to do not just the Crossroads Mall, but eventually they had plans to do the whole area. They could do some, they could buy up property and, condemn land, which was very, very unpopular. Anyway, this passed. It had to have a city vote to do the new kinds of financing. And then there was a lot of opposition, which ended up with another vote. I think the next year, might have been the year after that, where the idea was to repeal the first vote. So you had to vote yes on the first vote and no on the second vote. But that the vote to stop didn't pass. So the redevelopment went ahead. So that was pretty much what I did during those 2 years as president. There was a lot of talking to city council, planning board, going to meetings, late nights, and then I was also teaching my classes. After I was president, the presidency passed on to other people. I was on the board occasionally. I worked a lot on the international relations positions. We were studying the United Nations, how the power was shifting when the the General Assembly grew so fast because we had so many new countries, all the old colonies. Studying the United Nations and all this really helped me because at CU I started having to teach classes in topics I'd never studied, and one was kind of world musics, Indian classical music, Japanese classical music. So knowing some of the people that were interested in international relations things in Colorado and looking at international trade in Colorado and all sorts of things put me in touch with people that could kind of help me with the cultural aspect, the world musics aspect. So that was very helpful. And then let's see, in the 90s I did, I guess once in a while, I did the newsletter editing for a while.
That's a huge job.
Yeah, desktop publishing was sort of new. I remember my computer would just sort of shut down if I asked for 2 columns. I mean, you forget about the old computers. It would just take like days to save. I mean, saving was very difficult, if anything was complicated. And I did, I managed the membership database when we really got into the late 20th century and the whole National League got computerized. So I worked on that, and I worked on the Social Policy Committee. Then I was president again in 2003 to 2005. Went to a fun national convention in Miami. It was fun. The first national convention I went to, the one in 1980 when I was president the first time, was in Washington, D.C., and I think that was even more fun because President Carter spoke to the League, and it was kind of reported in the Washington Post. It was a big event. But the more recent convention was fun too.
Now, as president, can you tell us any special experiences or any, special work that you had to do that, set you apart from being a board member? In other words, a long-winded way of saying, what does the president of the league
Yeah.
do? When you're
Well-
league president, I'm sure there are certain things you're responsible for.
Yes, there are. Well, when you first get on and even become a board member or have the smallest job, you start having a lot of leadership training, and then especially for all board members. And as president, you're really taught not to do other people's jobs. Make sure everybody's doing their job, and if they're not, find help for people, but don't do other people's jobs. Delegate. But you do have to draw up the board meeting agenda. I was very reluctant to be president because I had a full-time job, a very busy job.
Yes.
And not that other league members aren't busy too. The typical, in the 60s, 70s, 50s, the typical league member was a young mother, started as a young mother and trying to have some adult conversation, adult activities outside the home, and so like my mother. But now it's kind of normal to have league members who do have a job outside the home. But I was in our league. I was the first. So a lot of the members, promised
Wow.
to help me, and they did. And I guess you're going to interview Gail Rowe, or maybe you have. She in particular had been a president somewhere else, so she would warn me a month or two or three in advance that something was going to happen, and I better start keeping track of such and such, because the National League was going to ask me for statistics, or the State League was going to ask me for statistics, or I was going to have to run the annual meeting. The whole league has a membership meeting, and I better contact the parliamentarian and start preparing my script so I could get through a meeting. I mean, I had no idea of parliamentary procedure. So she would warn me, and that was extremely helpful. I remember going to a meeting, and we had a member, Cynthia Jessel, who's still a member, who always refused to be president. Gail refused to be president of this league too, but they were extremely helpful. So I remember Cynthia, I was supposed to have my picture taken, I think it was at the UMC, and with a bunch of people, and I can't even remember the occasion, whether it was World Affairs Conference or what. And Cynthia comes running up to me and she says, "You're standing right in front of a big banner that says," I don't know whether it was Republican Party or Democratic Party, it doesn't matter, whichever. We had to move. She got everybody to move. We are distinctly non-partisan. We have members in both parties, probably in mostly Democratic Party now, but it used to be all parties, or I suppose some people who are unaffiliated, undeclared. I don't think that's so common in the league as it is in the general Colorado population.
Independent.
Yeah, independents. Yeah. So I had a lot of help with that, and so it was a lot of public appearances. Carolyn Holmberg it turned out, had kind of signed herself up, or signed the league up, to give presentations for the Chamber of Commerce, and I mean, there was all this stuff. And when she passed the gavel, so to speak, to me, she also notified all the local press that she was no longer speaking for the league. I mean, it was really quite scary for me, because she wanted to do some sort of partisan thing. She wanted to help one of our county commissioners get reelected, and things you couldn't really do as league president. So it was kind of a public job. I don't think the second time, more recently in 2003, it wasn't nearly so public, but you still do have to speak for the league. Answer the phone.
Answer the phone, speak for the league, appear
Yeah.
at whatever conventions.
And you sign the letters to the editor, usually co-sign with whoever did the actual letter writing. Yeah. And I always say, there's things about the league that are really similar to academic work, like this incessant studying.
Absolutely. Sometimes the League sounds like almost like a college.
I think that's what attracted a lot of people to League, especially in the early days, and still. So when the League was first started, and it was in this really out of the way town of Boulder, where a lot of the faculty wives just needed some outlet to, bring some kind of big city expertise to this town, and they started studying garbage and trash. They advocated a single system, citywide system for garbage and trash collection. Never happened. Pasteurization of milk, they got that through. That was good. But anyway, academia and League are sometimes similar, but academia is more, especially when you're a professor, it's more individual. So my university colleagues were quite shocked that I was, well, first they wondered how I had opinions on things that they had never heard of. Of course, I had never heard of them sometimes either, but they couldn't understand why I was signing letters that I hadn't actually written. A lot of them, not all of them, but some of them really weren't political. And that's kind of common practice in political organizations, People don't write their own speeches. And, we talked about this alternatives to the automobile campaign, and my picture was in the paper with the head of the chair of the Natural Resource Committee, and she had found herself a skateboard, and she had found a bicycle, and we had our picture taken in the middle of the street.
Do you want to go? You want to go over there and shoot it up close?
So the natural resources person, Jackie Salo, is supposedly on the skateboard. Needless to say, she just had one foot resting on it, and I'm holding onto this bicycle. And then there's a sign that says speed limit 55. It's a law we can live with. I think that was the US 36 speed limit law. But what we were really advertising was use of alternatives to the automobile. The city of Boulder was about to start constructing its remarkable, extraordinary bike path system. There were people visiting from Eugene, Oregon, which was considered the best model, and showing us what to do at when you come to a right turn or a left turn lane for the cars, and how the bike should be funneled to one side or the other. And this was all kind of new, Anyway, this was a big thing in the League.
And some of your colleagues in the music school objected to this?
Yeah, I guess we talked about that. One of my colleagues said, well, this woman ride a skateboard? And I said, no. Do you ride a bicycle? I said, no. He said, well, that's just dishonest. And you shouldn't show that. And that's just, the press is always being dishonest. I said, no, it's a publicity picture. It's supposed to be, exaggerated, and it's supposed to catch people's eyes. It really didn't seem honest. And I guess that's an interesting point of view. As I say, rational people can disagree.
And some of the comments of your colleagues are sort of interesting in that they sort of saw your civic work somehow as involving dishonesty.
And but before I retired, I was the 5 years before I retired, I was the associate dean in the College of Music, and so I sort of acquired all these administrative files. And this particular copy of this article, I found the reason it's pasted to a piece of paper was that the College of Music's PR person had cut it out, which had clipped it and pasted it and put it in my file, or a file of faculty publicity, which I thought was, the College of Music had nothing to do with this, but it was interesting that it attracted her eye. So
They were proud of their gal.
I suppose.
So you went on to be dean and
Or associate
kind of
dean.
associate
yeah.
dean, kind of a new level of work. And did the league you talk about, leadership training, did that
Yeah.
play a role for you?
That was very helpful. Yeah, to delegate and because I was there's endless work. There were a lot of things that were very similar, and understanding kind of meetings and due process and just all sorts of things about how the world works, planning something and implementing it step by step, and keeping in touch with your constituents. And I saw interview the other day where a couple of college presidents were saying, well, it's sort of like running a business, except you can't fire the students and you can't hire the professors. But other than that.
Right, well, so that brings us also kind of around to sort of just defining leadership. That apparently is one of the goals of the League of Women Voters, is to develop leadership among women. And can you talk a little bit about that in the Boulder League of
I think
leadership development?
Yeah, when I first got here, we mentioned Ruth Wright. I think she was in the legislature or had been. I'd have to check my dates, but the League had given her courage to first go to law school and then run for office. Janet Roberts and Ruth Carell, who were both so prominent, both attribute their courage, their activism to the League of Women Voters. I'm not sure it's so prevalent now that because women are a lot more courageous and have a lot more role models. But for a long time, it was the League of Women Voters was kind of the usual background for just about anybody. Since city council members, Annette Anderson was on the Boulder City Council, Sally Martin, let's see, who am I thinking of? Barbara. I better not start trying to remember people. Let's see, Zoe Menkick, I think, who left Boulder. She was one of the leaders. A lot of legislators, I think at the national level, a lot of Congress people had come out of the League of Women Voters. It was considered kind of training ground. And as I say, starting the 90s or so, maybe the 80s, along with second wave feminism, so to speak, women started seeing that they didn't really need to start with the League of Women Voters. And now, I guess, it looks like women run for office just because they want to run for office. They might not even know till they run that they have to know so much. Sometimes a nasty shock, when you run for office because you want to cut taxes, and then I guess you go to your first budget meeting and you think, well, let's see. There must be some other. I think I have to learn what else to do.
Well, it sounds like then the League really gives anybody who's a member, mostly women, a real training in studying the issue and really trying to understand that issue. The years that you describe of the study years before you actually get to the action part, it really lets you see the complexity.
Yeah.
And then maybe when people go into situations where they are leaders, they realize their eyes are wide open in terms of, this is going to be a lot more complex than I ever dreamed.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
I was wondering about sort of general membership. People obviously are driven by, the mission of the League of Women Voters. What is in it for sort of the members more on a, I don't know, a social level? I mean, there's always the social background of organizations. Can you describe a little bit about the sociability of the organization and what role that might play in keeping members?
Well, yes,
and
I think
keeping them active.
Yeah, I think people get working together get to be very good friends. Committees, become friendships. People that are used to going to the same unit meeting, like they all go to the Wednesday noon meeting. Well, that's a lunch meeting, but for a long time we had a dinner meeting. There's social time as well as, and then we've had a couple of big receptions, parties at our various anniversaries. We had a big, wonderful party for our 50th anniversary in 1981.
And that's when you were president.
That was when I was president. We didn't know quite how big and happy and joyful it would be, but it was fun. It was great fun. And then we have had sort of quieter things for the 75th anniversary more recently. I realized I didn't, a while back, I didn't quite state the mission of the League, which is informed citizen participation in government. So the idea is to get not just League members, but everybody to start participating. But anyway, social, for many years, I know the unit I went to that met over dinner, we decided we'd get together during the summer when there's no regular League meetings, and we'd get together for a no-host dinner someplace else and then invite spouses and friends. But we decided we didn't want to go 3 months without seeing one another, so that was kind of fun. So there's, I would say it's not that social an organization. I mean, compared to, say, AAUW, it's sort of the exceptional thing to have a reception or have, even our fundraisers are sort of few and far between, we sort of talk about having a big party that will be a fundraiser, but somehow it ends up to be a bus tour of solar installations or something.
Well, that can build friendships.
Can be fun, yeah. Yeah, that kind of thing.
So another thing that the League does is even tour things.
We have lots, we used to have a lot of bus tours and
so you're actually seeing what the issues are in action or whatever. That's interesting.
Yeah, we had a great tour of Boulder Creek. Oh, no, I guess it was Boulder Creek mitigation. It was more the tributaries, which are more dangerous than Boulder Creek, like Goose Creek and South Boulder Creek. We had a tour when we went and looked at riprap and all those things, aqueducts. Anyway.
Wow, it really does sound like a true engagement in the community. You're even looking at the geography and learning the geography.
We toured
as well as just the power structure.
An eco-cycle, and we toured the Justice Center. That was good. Know Your Jail. That some people laughed at us for. Is this a Know Your Jail study? Anyway.
There, in looking at the League and just mentioning doing all these things, are there other areas, other issues that we've looked at? You said sort of land use, resource management, comprehensive planning.
Schools.
So schools. You focus on issues like, are they like school lunches or?
Yeah, we've got the school district. Now, of course, we have 2 school districts to worry about, St. Vrain and Boulder Valley. But with Boulder Valley School District, the budget, which is a public document, was pretty opaque. So it's got the school board to sort of get some citizen advisory commissions, citizen advisory boards, budget advisory boards. Of course, a lot of League members were on those. Those could have been started. I'm not positive whether the League urged that. More recently, the St. Vrain Valley School District, our schools committee found, doesn't have any teen parenting programs. So the league members got the school board to start some, or actually the league committee kind of works with them, still works with them, volunteers with the teen mothers, and provide childcare while the mothers are in class. And
So that's interesting. That became an issue that you studied, and then as it evolved, you actually got the school district to pay attention to it and actually create a program.
Yeah, Boulder
Wow.
Valley had a good program. And
So that was a model in
yeah,
Boulder
we knew
Valley.
it could be done, yeah.
And it was convincing, and then they actually started to have one-on-one, I don't know if you want to call it mentoring of the girls that were involved. That's sort of a very in-depth way of making social change. I mean, it really is quite remarkable.
And then we had a very interesting panel in this last December on early childhood education. We didn't know much about it ourselves. The committee I'm on is studying all sorts of human services, and we discovered there's a big push now in the county and the cities to put a lot more emphasis on, from birth to 5 years old is such an important time for children. We had this wonderful speaker from, two speakers, from something called the PASO Project, which trains women to do childcare in their home, but to enrich the lives of the children. So they have it's mostly Latino families, and they call the women the aunties, the tias. And these two speakers who organized the project showed us the books they supply and the toys. Some of these households it's been very informal. A woman is maybe taking care of 3 or 4 children, and there may or may not be TV in the house. There might be no toys, or the toys might belong to the child who lives there, and the other children aren't allowed to play with them, and there maybe aren't any books. And anyway, the tias do some really high-level training over a period of weeks, and they get certified, and then they get paid, and they get supplies. It's just a wonderful program, so that they don't have to leave the home. They don't have to leave their own children, and yet they're getting quality childcare. The idea is to get children ready for kindergarten, which pays great dividends down the line. Fewer people in prison, fewer people needing remedial education. It's we all know it's a very important program, but it's very hard to budget for anything where the results are more than a year off, right? So, but Boulder County is a very rewarding place to do league action, because it's very receptive to a lot of ideas. We have a lot of specifically government issues. We've always thought that Boulder City Council should be elected at large, the way it is, but the idea of districting comes up periodically, quite frequently. We're always on this. We kind of check with our members, and we still think Boulder doesn't work well with districts. It works fine when people represent the entire population. Louisville has wards. It works fine for Louisville. We're not opposed to that. Longmont too. We can't reach any consensus about county commissioners. Once in a while somebody says maybe we should have 5 instead of 3, and we're not sure that would be better. No, they don't have consensus on whether there should be a county manager the way there's a city manager. The commissioners feel very comfortable without a county manager, because they work well together, the 3, and this has been true for years and years. They would rather not have a county manager who puts another layer between them and their department heads. It seems to work well. League members don't really know when it comes to a vote, should we expand to 5? We just don't know.
But there is that focus on just the operation of government.
On the operation, right.
And making it more democratic, more fair,
Which
more
things-
representative?
which we feel very strongly that we shouldn't be electing a coroner, but we are. The county hasn't caught up with us. But some offices should be appointed, some boards should be appointed, some should be elected. Some work pretty well half and half. Sort of the way a league board is, you elect some and then some get appointed. So yeah, it's very, just the structure is I think that maybe is what sets the league apart, is that intense interest in just the mechanics of government and how to get citizens involved.
Following up on that, I was wondering if you could talk. I think a lot of people have an image of the League of Women Voters, particularly from the 1980s when they ran the presidential debates, and actually I think invented them for television.
Right. It's kind of a, yeah.
So could you talk a little bit about the citizen education and fostering citizen participation?
Yeah, that's we really have these two areas, and we keep them really separate. And one is citizen education, and that's, as you say, the presidential debates. We have candidate forums as often as we can. City council candidate forums, school board candidate forums, and we invite everyone that's running, all parties. There's usually some libertarian candidates, and they say they don't get invited to other forums, but we always invite everyone. And then we publish, we used to publish information about the candidates. We haven't been doing that recently. The press is really doing that, seems to be covered a lot. And of course now candidates have websites, and it'd be almost superfluous. Mm-hmm. They have blogs, and they have they have forums online. So there's really no use of the League of Women Voters. But it used to be very, very useful to people. And we do research the ballot issues, and we try to kind of simplify the material and give the pros and cons. And so that's all separate, and we can get tax-exempt contributions for what we call our education fund. But then when we start trying to change things, trying to advocate for one side or another, we never advocate for a candidate, but when we start to advocate for some course of action, then that's not tax-exempt money, that's political action. People that don't agree with us usually get quite irate because they say, the League of Women Voters is supposed to be neutral, and that's, of course, not true. We're sometimes neutral, and sometimes very
depending on which part of your mission you're working on.
Whether if we have a position, then we're not at all neutral. Right. But if we're talking about all the choices that are presented to voters, then we're very neutral. Yeah. And so it's the two things: so the league, the core league, and then the education fund kind of thing.
So that's very helpful in explaining the league, in part because I think people do make that mistake about, I thought you were nonpartisan, but now you suddenly have a stance. So there is this difference between having a position and not supporting any party.
Just wanting
Although I'm sure in their private lives as private citizens, as you mentioned before, some of your members at least may be active in a political party as well, or actually even do maybe a little campaign work for a particular candidate.
And we have league members that are holding office.
That's true too. Of course,
you don't have to give up your political life. You couldn't be president, or you couldn't be voter service, which is supposed to be very even-handed. and be in office or be campaigning for somebody. It used to be that your husband or spouse couldn't either, but now that doesn't apply to spouses.
Well, we need to take a break and change the tape, and we'll be coming back and asking Deborah a few more questions. This is part B, a continuation of the interview with Deborah Hayes, which is being recorded for the Maria Rogers Oral History Program. The date is January 17th, 2011, and my name is Anne-Marie Poise. Picking up from our previous tape,
Part A.
we might now move into a different area, not so much, say, the internal workings of your organization, but also now how you interface with the general population and governmental boards or city council and county commissioners, and give us an idea of how the government or ordinary citizens react to League activities and League women.
Well, I think they think we're very serious, and we do a lot of studying, and we always make it a point to even though we don't campaign for any particular candidate. Once somebody is elected, then we're very interested in everything they do, and we interview them or ask them to speak at a bigger meeting. Because we're studying affordable housing, we've been talking a lot to the county commissioners who act as the county housing authority, and we've been interviewing them. We interviewed the Boulder mayor and the housing director and the housing authority director, and we did the same in Longmont. And we always, in this case, we make it clear that we're not compiling information about both sides. We're absolutely in support of government support or provision of affordable housing, a diversified housing stock. So then we sometimes ask, well, what can the League do are there issues coming up where you want us to help you get the citizens to vote for more? More and more that idea that government is responsible for the welfare of the citizens is being challenged, and it's in Boulder County, where we seem to be this little island where people vote to raise taxes for human services, but I guess that's not true in the rest of the country these days. Anyway, so we try to work closely with people, and we don't, as you say, we don't organize protest marches. We're kind of letter writers and dialogue types or interview types. We've had parades. But that's in celebration of something. But anyway.
So you're reformers, more working from within.
I guess so. Now, of course, we were founded with some very, very activist people who went to jail for women's suffrage and had a pretty gruesome time, but we seem to be, I don't think that once the League of Women Voters was founded, it became a lot more, I guess, a lot more working within the channels of power. And I don't think we're not exactly into civil disobedience. I mean, we certainly have, we have plenty of members who are, and who do get thrown in jail for what they're doing, and they certainly get League member support, but not official League support. We're not into civil disobedience, which is sometimes the only way to get things done. But anyway.
Well, yeah, well, working within the system and within your mission and the whole outline you gave of how you try to create change or, I don't know, responsibility and attention for a topic,
Yeah.
all is on a model of, you know, really engaging with the government.
Yes.
And also actually giving members an opportunity to be educated so that they can work outside of this organization or they can
Yes.
choose to work within this organization, but they get a
Yes.
great background for
Yes.
whatever choices they make along the way. So stepping back a little bit and now getting some of the big picture questions, how have you seen the League change since you became engaged in 1969, roughly? What are some of the big changes the League has faced? What are some of the challenges?
Well, nationally, a really declining membership, and we still think, our membership is around 200. We still think for the size of this community, we should probably have more members. I mean, this is a huge community now. The county and even the city of Boulder has grown hugely, and then mostly in the 90s. Our members are rarely young mothers. Young mothers now have 1 or 2 or 3 other jobs, I'm afraid. A lot of newly retired people joined the League. They felt they didn't have time when they were working, and then they retire and they have all this energy and all this expertise, and so that's been our kind of our lifeblood, our sustaining energy. We do a remarkable amount of stuff with very few people. We're very concerned now that this sort of the same people are doing everything. That wasn't really true in the 80s. We had a lot of active study committees. We had unit meetings twice a month. We're down to 1 month because for a number of reasons. Partly we don't have enough good solid material. We don't have enough committees generating all this material. And also people just don't have as much time. We've always had the problem in Boulder as compared to maybe some other places in the country of not getting a lot of publicity because we always thought there was just so much going on in Boulder, but now the press really isn't covering local news much at all. And in the 80s, there used to be an article in the local papers, the Times Call in Longmont or the Camera in Boulder, just saying that the League had elected new officers, or the officers had just returned from a national convention, or they'd send a photographer in Longmont. The Times Call sent a photographer on a sort of field trip the League organized for people to go visit their watershed, the city watershed, which was a bit of a hike. I mean, this doesn't happen nowadays. That, you know, it's so, but of course, at the same time, there's more online. We have a website. Our website gets better and better. We can put a lot of our own information online, and if we have unit meetings and a committee has presented material, we can put that online. So we're adjusting.
Adjusting to 21st century
Right.
technology and
Right.
and revisioning of media and so forth.
And I think the League is still respected. We've started observing. My committee started observing. We just sit in a meeting. We wear a big badge that says League of Women Voters, and we hear an amazing amount of stuff that doesn't get in the press, and maybe until maybe later, or maybe it turns out to be nothing. We get used to the kinds of meeting the kinds of people that are doing these things on the citizen boards or the elected officials or the staff. That personality. I mean, I hate to admit it, but personality is really important sometimes. Or interaction. You can have a board. I won't name the one I'm thinking of. There's one we stopped observing because we never saw a group of people less interested in the topic, refused to read anything. We just thought it was such a waste of time to sit there, and there wasn't anything to observe. But that's very unusual. Usually there's really dedicated people giving their time, and people that already have maybe the 2 jobs or the care of their grandchildren, and they still get themselves appointed to a board that takes a lot of more time.
Wow, and then the League actually has this other role of observing, being present, as another way of studying, like what is the issue and how is the government perceiving the issue and dealing with the issue. That's very interesting.
And how is, even if you've been at a meeting, you want to know how the press reports it, because that's what people think happened. And then if we think there's something missing, we start writing letters.
Now, with regard to the membership, I know that I believe it was in the 1970s that men were allowed to be members. Do you want to say anything about male members?
Well, it wasn't a big controversial thing. It was just that we believed that there shouldn't be all male institutions, public institutions. And of course the League wasn't required to admit men as members, but we just thought it was logical. And a lot of men, mainly members' husbands, joined right away. And we still have quite a few men, some who don't have spouses in League, they just join. Maybe they just want to pay dues to contribute to the cause. When I go to national meetings, I always see quite a few men that are on boards or in leadership. A lot of husband-wife co-presidents. We some men don't want to be president, but there are occasionally men as presidents. We didn't change the name of the organization because that would have meant that any group in the world could have taken the name and done who knows what damage to our reputation. So I think the men get sort of a kick out of belonging to the League of Women Voters. They just doesn't bother them.
Well, yeah, any man who wants to join.
Anybody who wants to.
It really wants to be involved, and that I think attests to maybe the value of the work and the fact that there's room for lots of viewpoints.
Yeah.
And anything else that you'd like to add about the League, basically, or predominantly as a women's organization?
Well, it's a great organization, and it's.
I mean, it is one of the unique features is that it is very, obviously, dominantly woman-focused and woman-run. So.
Yeah, I know I have several friends that are longtime members who think maybe our days are numbered, like the Boulder Women's Club disbanded a few years ago. But I don't know. Even the people that think our days are numbered still keep working hard, and as I say, we're adjusting, doing more with fewer people maybe, and it'd be hard to imagine the United States without a League of Women Voters. And actually, somebody was just pointing out to me, so maybe somebody has already said this to you in your interview, the National League office, seems to just have taken on new life recently. It's just amazing that they've got a very activist president who seems to go to Congress and go to participate in all sorts of very important organizations. So it's a real shot in the arm.
Right, and maybe the grassroots is reaching up.
Yeah.
To the national too.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. That there's kind of a very good sort of relationship between all the levels of the organization. But you're right, there can be a leader, there you go, again, leadership that comes forward and says, we need to do something different for the next few years. Another kind of big picture question, is what do you think have been some of the most important accomplishments of the League since you've been involved?
Well, I think the comprehensive planning, I mean, it's hard to say when the League can take credit, but the whole idea of comprehensive planning.
Or participating.
Yeah. And when I first moved here,
so comprehensive planning.
yeah, the Justice Center was, I don't think it had been built, but the new idea was community corrections, and rehabilitation, which seems everybody kind of accepts that now and promotes it. But I remember going to a meeting, when I was first here, it was a citywide meeting about community corrections, and a couple of judges spoke about how, those people in jail are our neighbors and our children and our children's friends and our neighbors' children. I mean, you don't throw people in jail. You're supposed to, this is punishment, but it's also rehab. And that was such a new idea to me. And the Justice Center was built with that, the building was designed with provisions for that. I think the schools, opening up the school budgeting process, the League contributed to that. I think the way the Boulder City Council districting proposals keep failing, that's because of the League. In Longmont has had a very distinguished history. They have wonderful affordable housing programs, and they seem to have stemmed from one or two Longmont League presidents who ended up working for the county and the city, and then the Boulder County in housing. And it started out kind of trying to manage. Maybe a church congregation wanted to dedicate land for affordable housing, and then it needed some. I mean, suddenly you have to create some policy. What is our policy? And the League was very active in Longmont, more than even in Boulder. Although Ruth Carell, her main thing was affordable housing. I don't know. It's just hard to identify an area where League wasn't kind of active. The League used to make sure there was a UN Day celebration every October. Now the League just partners with a lot of NGOs. It's just we really have made a difference, I think.
That's
I believe.
we need to have more people hear that, and to know the number of areas that you participate in. I think sometimes that's not obvious now that the newspaper is not reporting every week about what the League is up to.
Right.
So one of my last questions is, how have you changed because of your involvement in the League?
Well, I think the League gave me a lot more confidence, partly from understanding more and then really widening my circle of friends, and also I learned a lot about things other than universities and other than music history, and met people, very different people. People with very different interests, and it gave me, as I say, a lot more confidence to think I could accomplish something.
Well, good. Then one of the goals of the League has been met in you.
Yes.
And what you're able to have done with your life and convey to others.
The CU faculty was pretty male-dominated, and well, it still is, but my department was all men. So the League was, and also the Women's Studies department, both were good, presented me with good role models in those days when I was, as I say, becoming a grown-up. Because you don't feel those things as a student, you don't feel that you're not a threat when you're a student, right?
Right. Well, it was with the having no real mentors within the university at that point for mentoring. It was great that there were other sources
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
for mentoring and really fostering your ability. And one of the things that the League did, it noted your capabilities and
Yes.
asked you to come forward
Yes.
as a leader
Yes.
and supported you in that.
Yes. Yes. Because
And
there's yeah, that's because academia tends to be more comfortable if the women are not.
well, everything tends to be more comfortable if the women are quiet. When women start to
sometimes,
gain
yeah.
their voice,
Yeah.
they can make some really important changes, not only for themselves but for the whole society.
Yes.
That's why so much, I think, NGO work is focused on women and girls, because now they're
Yes.
seeing that if you involve the women and the girls, that development happens in a different way and more sustainable way.
Yes.
So maybe you're becoming a global model for people too. One of my last questions is, do you have any personal stories or anecdotes about your experience in the League that you'd like to share that didn't necessarily fit into one of our categories of questions?
Well, I know we other times we've talked about just kind of personal things, some things that haven't changed. Sometimes you think haven't changed, and I just quite recently one of my brothers said his recollection of our mom was, and I really don't. I mean, this must have been internalized with me because, but it was conscious for my brothers, both of them actually. Was that she and her friends, who of course my brothers thought of as extremely competent, strong women, would sit around, meet together, and they would be discussing what man they could get to promote some idea they had. It was their idea, but they wanted to find a man that could kind of make sure to either present the idea or at least second it. And I'm afraid that hasn't changed. I mean, it's anyway, both brothers remember that, and I was just really struck by that. And both of my brothers married very strong women, so obviously they're not scared of strong women. They have, this kind of partnership kind of marriages. So I think maybe that's sort of a microcosm of society, because I think there's less and less of men feeling threatened by the League of Women Voters, but you still want to be sure you're, well, it's not necessarily the men, but as the people with power. You're trying to make sure. That's politics, right?
Right, and shifting, political balance is
Yeah,
important.
yeah.
That's a wonderful story about your family.
Well, it was, as I say,
And I bet, they're memories of your mother, but I bet the fact that your dad was also very comfortable with what...
Yeah.
I'm assuming that he was okay with what your mom was doing,
Yeah, and my, one of her uncles kept telling people she was going to be governor one day, which wasn't exactly her ambition, and she used to just laugh, but he was really struck. I mean, he was always trying to get her to make sure she did more and more. So she had lots, and her father. Anyway, it's a chain of influence.
I just have one question before we wrap up.
Okay.
What was the influence on your mother? Was your grandmother a suffragist?
Well, she was very strong, but she was sort of shy as a person. So, but my mother's father was very gregarious, and my mother's mother supported him. So, no, she was. But I think she was an influence on my mother because she was very, very strong morally. My mother's parents, I think, were both an influence, but her father was the civic-minded one. And with my father, his father, his mother had been sort of active in their community. His father had been a circuit court judge, in West Virginia, rode horseback through the warring families. And anyway, so they were, yeah, I guess they both had role models.
So you are in a long line of civic activists.
I
and
think
that's
so.
Interesting to note, and also the families that people have created in your family, subsequently your brothers, and bring those traditions forward too.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very interesting, the continuities. I'm glad that the League was a home for you.
Yeah, yes. I am too.
Any further comments that you'd like to add?
I don't think so. This has been very, very interesting and fun.
Thank you so much for giving us this interview.
You're welcome.
It's a wonderful, in-depth view of the League of Women Voters of Boulder County.